I was born and raised 2 doors from where I live presently. The cemetery is 2 more doors away, and I'm 85 and a half, and I'm not going to the cemetery. I'm going to be cremated and going with the wind.
You are an airman. You were in the Air Corps back in World War II, correct?
Yes, I enlisted in July of 1942, and they called in 44,000 too many pilots. So we spent 17 months picking up stones and tree roots and planting grass at Lackland Air Force Base when that was being built. It was right above Kelly Field. So we spent 17 months without an overnight pass, and we earned our way in our wings on the 23rd of May 1944.
Tell me why you wanted to enlist back in 1942.
Well, the war was on, and all the friends were leaving. And besides, I couldn't swim. I didn't want to get in the Navy, and I hated horses with a passion. I didn't want to get in the the horse outfit, and I'm too lazy to walk. So what else is there to do? And I had no education, but I passed the waiver, and I learned to fly, and I still fly.
How old were you when you enlisted?
I was 20. I never was drafted. I had never registered, and when I got out, nobody could understand how come I was in if I wasn't registered. But I enlisted, and it was well worth my while. I met a lot of good people, got a good education, and I just saw a lot of the world I would never have seen from Badger.
Tell me about after you enlisted and after you went through your training, where did you go from there? Where were you sent overseas at?
Well, it took 17 months of moving. They called too many people to go to the flying school, so we were sent to Jefferson Barracks, Missouri, right outside of St. Louis, and we were there to mark time until they got room in the what they called college training detachments. Us illiterate people that didn't have college were to be sent there, and so I think it was February about the 1st on my birthday that we went to Jefferson Barracks. And we lived in Pneumonia Gulch, they called it. It was tents on poles that were 6 feet tall, about like a railroad tie stuck in the ground so that the river water wouldn't bother. And it was cold in the middle of the winter. And when you went to GI, the floors on those tents had wooden floors, of course, up there. But if you didn't hurry up and sweep the water out, it would freeze on there. And I also learned that if you walk by one of those, you don't walk close to the door because so that stuff swept out of the door will freeze right on your uniform. And the latrine was a half-mile away, and it had stools, thank God. They had 13 in a row and 4 rows of them, face to face and back to back. And everybody got the GIs, and I guess everybody should know what that is. And so the paper was gone, so they used newspaper. And the most homesick man I ever saw in my life was a man that stood up and he'd walked a half mile to the latrine, and everybody was in a bad way. And he turned around and he flushed the thing while he stood up, and his long johns and his short johns and everything and his pants were all on the floor. And so it made about 2 circles and went off into his breeches. And that's the most homesick man I'd ever seen in my life. And he was homesick, and we all felt sorry for him because, man, that's cold walking home. Okay, we were there. We were there until April, February, March, April. And I was so sick that I wanted to get out of there. And I knew I had a temperature, and I've had a red complexion all my life. So when it came time to move, they gave me a thermometer. And when it went up to 98.6, I held it in my teeth so it wouldn't go over. Consequently, we moved to Columbia, Missouri, a nice university town with 2 girl colleges there. And I was so sick that I'd take 1 step forward on those cobblestone streets in the snow and then slide one step back. And so I went to the sick hall, and there were 1,000 sailors that were there ahead of us, 1,000 Yanks that were learning to fly for the Air Corps. And 22 of those guys had scarlet fever. And so this lady doctor that our Army doctor wasn't there yet, she said, oh, you've got scarlet fever. I tried to argue with her. I said, I've had it. When I was 9, I had scarlet fever. She said, you've got it again. So she put me with those 20 sailors, and one college fellow kid that had one leg off, and he was a real clown. But anyhow, I'm in there for 3 days, and the army doc showed up. He said, "You don't have scarlet fever, but I think you've got spinal meningitis." So he put me in an intensive care place with a kid that had spinal meningitis, and inside of 3 days, I got scarlet fever, but I didn't have spinal meningitis. So there I am, 22 days. So I missed most of the college training that I should have had. And when I got out, I was so weak that I couldn't even walk. Say nothing about run, the mile we had to run. So they started calling me Milo. Rotten devils, you know, they just do that to make a man feel bad and homesick and everything else. And so we left there and were sent to San Antonio Aviation Cadet Center, which is now Lackland Air Force Base. And it's where everybody still goes. We planted the grass. We picked up the cigarette butts, and it was right above Kelly Field. And it was a side hill there where we ran the cross country that really would tax your strength. And I was weak just out of the hospital, but I couldn't sit down because the chiggers would get you. So if you needed to have a tooth fixed or done, you didn't dare to miss the next formation because you had to write an RBI, a reply by endorsement, and it was easier to try to run than it was to do that. Survived 17 months of that kind of living, and we planted the grass, and we had a minister that said one time, gee, you ought to see that Lackland Air Force Base is the most beautiful place in the world. And I let him go on, and when the church service was over, I said, "You should have seen it when you Texans and Christ had it, you know. It was a hellhole. We're the people that picked the grass and the rocks and planted the trees and laid the sidewalks. They were just boardwalks when we were there." And he says, "Pardon me," he says, "I'll never bring it up again in your presence." So, and he's a minister living right down here in just south of town. He's not retired, but he's a good minister still with his learning. He said, "I learned more in Badger than I did in the seminary." Okay? And from there we went to classification, where you're classified as pilot or gunner or whatever. And I made it through that and was held over because I couldn't read blinker very fast. And it saved my life because the kids that were smart went to Ploesti. And they're dead, and I'm here telling you a story.
Tell me what blinker is, though.
Ploesti is the oil fields in Romania that the boys from Italy all were bombing. We didn't reach it from England, but the boys from Italy, that's where they were really massacred. Our biggest target in that sort of stuff was at Merseburg, where they had 425 guns heavier than 88 millimeters could bear on you at one time. Okay, so we went from San Antonio. Took an awful long time. It was winter when we went to Ballinger, Texas to learn. We had 10 hours of flight time in Piper Cubs at Columbia University in Columbia, Missouri. But then we were sent to Ballinger, Texas, where we flew PT-17s. They were a Ranger airplane. It was an inverted six-cylinder engine, so you could see over the top. And open cockpit, wore Gosports and goggles all winter. And it was a place to learn. I had a really good instructor from Pennsylvania.
And your classification was pilot, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
Yes, I was classified as a pilot. And so we got through Ballinger, went to the only basic training flying school in Central Training Command at Brady, Texas, not far away, all of them just west of San Antonio. And we finished basic training there, had the first snow in 28 years there, and nothing to move it with, and those crazy Texans, 28 years old, were out rolling in the snow, you know. And us Yanks from Dakota were glad to stay by the heater, you know, until they wore out the snow so we could fly. From there we went to Altus, Oklahoma, which is now a big C-5A base. And we graduated from there with the only 18-9 was a Curtiss-built airplane with a small empennage just ahead of the tail, all steel, sat on 120 gallons of gas and that twin engine. would not fly on one engine. It had one speed, 120 mile an hour, takeoff, land, fly, glide, and everything else. And it glides so steep without power, you had to look through the roof to see it come down. So it take power to round it out on the bottom. From there, we were sent to Lincoln, Nebraska, where we assembled a crew. And I hadn't had any transition in B-17, so I was delegated the Air Force, or the airline, or the aircraft commander, and I picked up my bombardier and navigator and 6 gunners. There were 6 enlisted men, and 4 of us up front. I picked those up, and we were sent to Rapid City, a beautiful place in the summertime in 1944. The non-natives thought, oh gosh, this is a terrible place to be sent to South Dakota. We've heard nothing but bad about it. But when they got here, they found that the tourists weren't able to come, and the newly married guys could have their bride living in the motels and the apartments, which were pretty simple in those days. And we had a really good summer there. And there we checked out a man to become the pilot, and he checked me out as a pilot when we got overseas. So that we flew equal time, 20 minutes apiece. And we did fly 33 missions into Germany from England. We did fly 34 out, and we walked once during the Battle of the Bulge. We were shot down in February on our 13th, 15th mission. And we were evadees for 11 days. And we got back to, from Reims to Paris, we rode a railroad train. And we caught a C-47 that happened to be going to London from Paris. And we took a train from London up to our base at Dis, which is 90 miles north. And we finished our tour. And we had a really good session. I was home, having graduated the 23rd of May. I was home the 1st of June when the invasion took place. But I was there to fill out. And we had a classmate from Arlington High School named Ed Herrick was shot down on September 11th, and we were there by the 20th, and it happened that I took his place just out of the clean blue sky.
You replaced a fellow from Arlington?
Yes, a classmate.
Wow.
And I didn't even know he was in the Air Force. And another classmate was a crew chief on the plane that I flew, and I didn't know he was in the Air Force till I motioned for him to move the chocks one day when we got ready to leave, and there's Lyle Peel. Yeah. Oh, life
just shows how many young men were signing up for service, too.
Well, everybody in small town. We lost 7 of our 39 classmates. I lost 7 the first year in the war. And that was we graduated in 39. So when that was over, I chose not to fly a B-24 back. I didn't want to ride in one, say nothing about bring it back. So I came back on the Ile-de-France, and I was back home on VE Day. I had enough points to get out, and I had an idea I should get married the 1st of August, and we did. That's 62 years. That's 63 next August 1st. We're halfway there. And I still have her, and she's in really good shape. I've had assisted living for the last 10 years right at home. She is my assistant. And with my back in bad shape, she does everything, the brain work, the book work, and everything else, the cooking, the baking, and cooking. And she even helps me up if I can't. And so I feel really blessed to have been born into a lucky situation like this.
Did you know her? Were you dating when you went overseas to service?
I dated her sister, but she was in Chicago, and she came back home. Her brothers, all 3 were in the service, so she came back to help her parents on the farm. And she was working. This is a beautiful story. You won't even believe it's true, but it is. She came back to help her mother and dad on the farm, milk cows and thresh and pump water for the cows, and that it was done by hand in those days. And so she was working in the hardware store in our little town of Badger, and my 2 girlfriends had tough luck and got married while I was gone, and her 2 boyfriends got killed. So there's nobody left in town but her and I didn't have a telephone, a car, or even money. And so we started dating, and that was when I was home in May. And by August, I was flying Bombardier Cadets in Big Spring, Texas. I wanted to go to the coast and fly C-54s and haul beer and pianos and pretty girls for the USO and all that stuff, you know. But that was full. So I flew Bombardier Cadets, and it was good time. We flew from 4 in the morning till midnight, till noon. And so I came home, and we had to get married. Mind you, I had to get married August 1st of 45. And I got, and she was working for the hardware man. In the daytime, she kept books and made nails and things like that. And at night, she babysat their son, who they had adopted. So she had plenty of experience, and we didn't have a car. We'd catch a ride and go to a town that had movies or a bathhouse or something. And we survived. We're still married after 62 years. And she's the best wife I ever had.
Congratulations.
I got the pick of the litter, and I got her last. All of her sisters were married, and we're still getting along. When I left this morning.
That's fabulous. And you mentioned how she does a lot of the work for you, but you yourself, you're still flying and driving and doing.
I can't pass a flying physical, and the airplanes kind of know where they are. They know where they go. I wouldn't, but I have a chance to ride in a jet that they fly at Luke this year. My navigator's son-in-law, he died in '65 in Milwaukee, but his son-in-law is working still for the Guard at Luke. He's promised me a ride in what they're flying out there, F-16.
Oh, that's good.
And I'll enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
And he can put me in the simulator, I can smash it, and they'll rebuild it. It'll be ready to fly in 5 minutes. Yeah, it's a beautiful life. I love it, every minute of it.
Mm. I want to go back to when you had to walk out of Germany after you. Tell me about your plane going down. Tell me about the feelings you had at that time.
Well, it isn't fear, it's anger. You know, you see those dudes out there, and they really giving you a raking over. We lost an engine and couldn't feather it. Feather means we couldn't turn it into the wind so it would stop. And when it does that, you're in God's mercy. You need to get the thing off there before it catches fire, because when it windmills, it doesn't get oil. And the gearing in that front end of that engine is 16-9. So there's a gear set in there that runs, and they run hot. And so we had to turn down to about 120 mile an hour indicated on 3 engines, which is possible. But we did remove all the guns and flak suits and the ball turret even. We dismounted them. We took them. They left. And so we sailed along between 2 layers of overcast and undercast with 2 wounded aboard. We couldn't bail out. And I wasn't really sure. The mistake I made was from Hamburg. It's only about a very short distance to Denmark, and I speak the language fluently. And so instead of trying to go west as far as we could get, where the bulge was, I should have been in Denmark. I could have been a fisherman, a farmer, or just a sheep herder, you know, for the balance of the war. But I guess we didn't even vote on it. We were just anxious to get west as far as we could. And when we were out of fuel, we let through the soup. First thing we saw was the Reims Cathedral. And I was very happy because that was close to the edge of the bulge. They were still Germans carrying our guns, wearing our uniform, and they were using our passwords, of which I didn't even know. I'm no ball fan, but they knew them all, you know. And I had the feeling that if we could, so we made a pass at the first runway, and it had 4 bomb craters. And of course, the first bomb crater took care of the wheels. We got the wheels down. Shouldn't have had, but we put them down, and and it didn't catch fire because there was no gasoline. So we walked away from the thing, and I left some pictures here of some of the artifacts that I picked up, and they're just good to have, good remembrances.
Tell me about those artifacts.
Well, I have the skin from an Me-109, a Messerschmitt. Was a hot little airplane, a single-engine fighter, and they were a lot lighter than the P-51, but they didn't carry. They had a cannon instead of 50 or 30 calibers. And so they were tough, and they would pick off the stragglers. The flak would take out an engine or 2, or blow a wing off, and make you lag behind. And without the concentrated fighter force, fire force that they had with the 50 calibers, 14 of them on a B-17. And when you get 30 some airplanes in one group, it's pretty hard for them to get through. But when you're straggling home, they'll get you, and they could pick you off. And did have the reason we're called the Bloody Hundredth. One of the reasons is that a misconception was that if you are not able to get back, drop the wheels and pull out of formation and drop the wheels, and the German fighters should come up and escort you to a base so they can capture you. Story has it that the 100th Bomb Group, a new crew that didn't understand what was going on, waited until these ME-109s came alongside and shot them down. And that really made hard feelings. They said our insignia was a square D, which is 3rd Division is square, and 1st Division is triangle. But the square with a D in it was poison to the Germans. And they laid for us. We lost 13 of our 36 airplanes on 31st of December in 44. We lost 11 on September 11th the same year, which Ed Herrick was in on. And from Bremen in October of 43, we had the first kamikaze pilots because nobody came home. They just left the airplanes. We had one came back, and his name was Rosenthal, and he just passed away last year, about the 23rd of January, when we had our last small mini reunion in Palm Springs. I spoke with him on the telephone. He had a hip replaced, and he had a stroke and an aneurysm and passed away without coming. He was planning to come to it, but he died before the thing was over.
So you lost a lot of your friends during the war and after too, but a lot during your service.
We still do. I graduated with class 44E. That was May of 44. There was a ton of us guys. There's 2 of us left that I know of, and the one of them is a guy that became the adjutant for the VFW, and he lives in Springfield, Missouri, and myself. And the last interview we had here, 2 of my pilot friends were here, and they're both dead since then, and that's only been a year or 2 ago. And so I'm at the right age group where every day is a special day.
Most definitely. We're happy that you're here talking with us today. Going back, I'm curious, how far a walk did you have to get from the Rheims Cathedral to safety?
From the Reims Cathedral, I carried a lot of money. I wanted a first-class ride if I could bribe somebody, you know. Like I said, I hate to walk. I'm lazy. And so I carried quite a bit of money. And my crew was living close to their stomach, belly, and whatever you call it. And so we spent my money first, and then we started looking for a ride home. It took a lot of champagne. There are 13 miles of champagne caverns that a cable goes down through with hooks, and all the champagne comes out of there in baskets, and it's kept in the baskets to age, and it comes out of there and it gets on that cable and it brings it up to the top. Now those Frenchmen were smart enough that they concealed some of those. I saw 2 or 3 of them that were concealed. The Germans didn't know that there was stuff left in there, but they were just as black as the other walls, and they're black from ages, you know. And we caught a ride in a baggage car from Reims to Paris, partway. And we just kind of played it cool. Everybody carried a 45, and we had our flying clothes on. No way we could get lost. But we were lucky enough that we got to Paris, and there we caught a C-47 and had our parachutes and the rest of the gear that we could carry, and our souvenirs that I brought here today. And we got to London, and when they went to pick up the parachutes, the man in the baggage cart. He picked them up with the red handles, so we got 2 poofs, And because the chutes are all over, man, we were busy putting them all in bags and getting out of there. But he thought that was a good handle, but it was a wrong thing to do. So we're 90 miles from home. When we got there, they had our clothes packed and didn't know we were coming, and we had no way to tell them. And we were really in no hurry to get back. We were in God's hands, and so we got our stuff back and we finished our tour. We were all done, and I was in Manchester on the way home on the Ile-de-France. We sailed from Greenock, Scotland, and I happened to be in Manchester the day Roosevelt passed away. Yeah.
What was your reaction when you learned that Roosevelt had died?
Well, we knew the war was close to an end. In fact, we flew our last 7 missions in 11 days. And they were trying to get us done so we could get out of there when the big rush came, you see. And I was almost sad that had I stayed, I could have taken a B-17 and flown across the channel to Denmark. And there at that time, I had 65 cousins, aunts, and uncles living. But I didn't get back there till 61. My sister was there in August, and there was no wall in Berlin. And I got there in November, and there was a wall in Berlin. I got to Checkpoint Charlie to see how the Russians reacted, and it took us 28 years to get the wall down. I'm disgusted with that, but I'm glad it happened. The little medal I have around my neck is something the Russians took pride in accommodating us when this man Rosenthal that I tell you about is a good friend, had his arm in a sling when I got there. He flew 52 instead of 33 tours. He flew 52, and the last as a group leader, because as a Jew, he was an aggressive man. If you missed Berlin and he was the leader, you're going to go back until you hit it. Make up your mind you're going to hit it. And when we left, he had his arm in the sling, and he had just bailed out over the Oder River, 40 miles from Berlin. And he'd been taken prisoner. He hollered, "Comrade," thinking it was Germany. And the Russians thought he was German, and they about cut his arm off. But he's alive and survived. He's one of the hot shots that we got in our group. Yep. He and Colonel Jeff are the 2 of the leaders that we'd go to hell for and come back.
Tell me about your homecoming. How excited was your family to see you?
Well, I was an only child for 18 years, 3 months, 17 days, 2 hours, and 20 minutes, and then I had a sister. And, she was kind of slow. I learned to fly before she learned to walk. So she was still a baby when I came back, and we had a lot of good times together. But I was fortunate in that my folks brought up a cousin that was orphaned almost, and they brought her up, and she was closer probably than my sister was. But I took that sister, and we had a lot of fun. She became a college student, a professor, married professor that happened to be a neighbor kid's kinfolk by accident. I guess love goes everywhere. But anyhow, they got married, and she lived a good life and raised 2 children. And I took her to Denmark with my oldest granddaughter in 1993, and we had a cousin party over there in one of the lofts. And we had 35 people there, which I made Roski hamburgers, or that's a hamburger that I learned from in Germany. And we had a really good time there. And when we came back through customs, I was in the lead, being the fat old man, And so the inspector said, "Did you bring any food?" I said, "Food, look at here, boy." I said, "Man, they fed us, wined us, and died. I'll get out of here." And my sister had the meat, and my granddaughter had the cheese. But they didn't have, they said, "Get out of here."
Let you go through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Oh, those customs people are nice. When I go to Denmark, I said, "Do you find me got to come hit me in?" It means it's really good to get home again. Get out of here. It's great.
That's fabulous. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share from your service? Maybe the most prominent memory you have or experience?
I could tell you a lot of stories that wouldn't look good on the CD. but I'm just thankful that we got the dead man's bottle drank. It's in the pictures, and it was one that the navigator or bombardier bought for us when he quit flying. We were shot down. He didn't fly anymore, but he bought this dead man's bottle. And it's been they trusted it to me. I don't know why. With my complexion, I shouldn't be trusted with any liquor. but it lasted well at my house. And so we have a mini reunion. And I get to thinking last year, we have a big reunion every 2 years. We used to do it every 3, but so many old buzzards died the 3rd year. We're doing it every 2 now. This year we had it in Nashville, and my son went, but I didn't. So I guess maybe I'm slipping. But we do have a mini reunion. We have it at Palm Springs, always in February, one of the first weekends in February. And there I had brought this bottle of cognac, and we had people from the museum in England there, and we had curators, all the people from the Historical Society there, and we made TV out there, and we drank that bottle on Sunday morning right in the lobby of the hotel that we had the meeting at, and it's all on film and record, and I guess probably that's the biggest time we ever had over a drink.